I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet here with the Dude and Golan. I want to welcome everybody and remind everybody to nicely, kindly give us that 5-star, very helpful, and follow the show, also very helpful. Golan, it's interesting because this New York race, and I think so much of everything comes down to, especially about with America in regards to the rest of the world, what's going on. It's the implications are extremely scary. And I know they're trying to do everything they can to get Mamdani out of the race, but part of me thinks, and I wrote this to somebody, America first doesn't mean America's stupid. And I really feel like we're acting stupid. We're ignoring what's going on. We're not getting a taste. And now, this isn't everybody. Obviously, many people follow what's going on in Europe and Wales and other major cities across Europe. But I don't think this is getting attention enough. I don't know if Trump is speaking about it enough. I don't know if anybody is talking about what's going on. Maybe out of fear of talking about Islam. I don't get it. But if we continue down this path, we are so screwed, it's not even funny.
I think you're not wrong, man. The problem is that when you are America first, the concept of America first, you know what? Wait, let's separate. There's America first and there's America only, right? These are the two categories that we often are looking at. And the American only thing is actually the one that worries me more. We can be America first and still understand the rest of the world matters. We can be America first and still recognize that there's a precedent being set. We can look at what's going on in Europe. We can look at what's going on in other places and see what people's strategies are, what bad actors' strategies are, et cetera. If you are America only, which I call America alone, then you are sticking your head in the sand and hoping that nothing ever approaches you and thinking, as long as I can't see it, I am safe, despite the fact that you might be surrounded with your head in the sand by a bunch of people with knives and guns. So I think that the idea of us not paying attention to what's happening in the rest of the world is actually something that is very concerning, especially when you're looking at the New York mayoral race. This Zoran Mamdani, this jihadi, this terror supporter, let's again, as Men pointed out yesterday, even if you remove all the terrorist tendencies, you are still left with the skeleton of a socialist who wants to destroy the American way. But right now, for a moment, let's just look at the jihadi side of things. If you are ignoring what happened in the UK, if you are ignoring what happened in France, if you are ignoring what's happening in Canada, if you're ignoring what's happening in Dearborn Heights in Michigan, that just yesterday, I believe, unveiled their new police patch that has Arabic on it for the first time in the United States.
Let me interrupt you for a second. You know, this is really important you're bringing this up because this really goes to show you when you break societal norms, you never know what's next. So when you look at Los Angeles, where we used to live, where men frequents every once in a while, you go to West Hollywood, you have the same thing with the cop cars and the pride stuff. And a cop car should just be a cop car.
It is a pretty major thing. And it's Dearborn Heights in Michigan,
where they had the rally with 40,000 people.
That's Tlaib's district.
Yes, that's Tlaib's district. And the police department, as if they didn't know that they'd done something that was going to light the ire of many people, they posted it on Facebook very proudly and then as quickly as humanly possible disabled comments and said, this is celebrating the city's diverse culture. And then they all dived under the couch to ignore responses. When we ignore all of those things, both internally and externally, and don't realize to appropriate Bill Maher's term, this is truly a slow-moving coup and something that the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE told us they were going to do over the course of 25 years. And now, 25 years later, here we are. And so if we are ignoring history and ignoring Europe and ignoring the rest of the world and ignoring even what's happening in our own backyard, we don't look at the New York mayoral race in the same way. We don't realize that this is the pilot program for what, if this happens and if this works, how do we get all the idiots who are hipsters who just want to, socialism sounds awesome, man. I want to go put on my Che Guevara t-shirt to vote for this guy, regardless of the fact that they're probably putting their own heads in the noose and down on the guillotine. And they will do this again in other places until little by little we will notice, but it might be like the frog in the boiling water that we might notice too late, that it is everywhere.
The only language that should be on any patches, any signs, we're in America, should all be English. That is it. I don't want no Swahili. I don't want no Hebrew. I don't want no Arabic. I don't want any other language. This is America. So, doing that with the police in Michigan is just a further example of a an invasion. It's not assimilation. They are not becoming Americans. They are not speaking English. They are not learning our customs and our ways. They are electing their lunatics to local, state, federal government, and it's a takeover. This is not a mystery. We know what they are doing. They say it at their rallies. They say it at their conventions. They just had this Palestine convention. I believe it was in Michigan as well. And they called for the destruction of Israel, of course, but for the destruction of America and Western values. They want to get rid of all of it. So it definitely needs to be done. Yes, look at Europe. Look what's happened. You have a lot of these cities in the UK that are taken over by Pakistani radical Muslims. And you have the same thing in France with the Algerian problem. And it doesn't end well. And, I've said this before. You can't take in the world's refugees. It's just impossible. We don't have enough space, food, resources to take in all the refugees of the world. So if we can't take them all in, then we should be looking at solutions in their home countries. We are not obligated. This is a big thing, is that we are not obligated to take in anybody. It is charity to take people in, and we should be picking the best and the brightest, which is what made this country great. We took in great people who wanted to become Americans, who wanted to contribute to this experiment that we're doing. I mean, it's the only nation in the history of the world that did this thing, where a whole bunch of people ran away from the UK, came here, and invented this new way of governing. And it's great, and it works, and it lifted more people out of poverty. So people need to see that. And I think people in inner cities where they've been languishing for a long time, the Detroits of the world, they're ready for change. They just need to be shown, which is what we're doing with American exceptionalism, putting up these billboards, using the data that Judah provided to us, saying how long you've been voting a certain way, maybe it's time for change. And we're still working on what the slogan of our change is going to be, but it's not going to be si se puede.
I just want to add one thing about the event that he mentioned that just happened in Michigan, which was the People's Conference for Palestine. We just mentioned Rashida Tlaib. I just want to give you guys a quote, and this is important because men said they were calling for the eradication of Israel. Okay, you know what? Bad enough. That's an ally. That's not nice, et cetera, et cetera. But this is America. So let's talk about what does she say about America? And this is the thing that should be concerning people again, and in the sand, not realizing that they're also talking about us. It starts with the Jews. It doesn't end with the Jews. It starts with Israel. It doesn't end with Israel. She said that America was, quote, built on slavery, genocide, rape, and oppression. And then said something like, I would be Hamas. So we can dislike her politics when it comes to the Middle East. We can say, oh, she's Palestinian, so hate the Jews. That's it. She hates America, and she is a representative of America speaking in an American city, in an American state, to ostensibly other Americans, calling for the eradication of America. That should concern all of us, and all the American aloners are missing it.
Well, let me give a little context. So this is in Dearborn Heights, obviously, Michigan, what we're talking about with the patch. So the Dearborn Heights Police Department is proud to share the new optional patch that our officers may wear. So this wasn't, by the way, again, this is one of those things, as we've witnessed with the universities. This wasn't an Arab that decided to do this. This patch was created by Officer Emily Murdoch, who decided to reflect and honor the diversity of our community. So it was done by a white liberal woman, I'm guessing. Our officers proudly serve all members of our community, and this new design is another way we continue to celebrate the rich cultures that make our city unique, it added. Remember when they wanted to change the name of the Washington Redskins? No Native American group wanted this name change, or the Cleveland Indians, or whatever it is. Nobody ever was bothered by that because, again, Golan, it's like you're taking away from their heritage by doing that, like replacing Aunt Jemima, replacing Uncle Ben. These are things we really need to watch out for, and that's my point.
But why did they change Aunt Jemima? Why'd they do that? They did it because they were trying to virtue signal to the woke mobs. Great. You lost your market value. I will never buy Aunt Jemima again. It was a staple brand. It's been around for 100 years. Nice black lady, right? It was a black lady on the cover.
Yes.
What was wrong with that?
No, it was the shape of the bottle.
Yeah, and it was also, she was the first, and it's not just that. The money that she made supported so many people. It supported African villages. There were so many great things that were done because of the money that she was an icon to the black community.
This reminds me, there's a perfect example. There was a company called SodaStream. which was an Israeli company that built a factory on the border with Judea and Samaria. And they employed something like 2,000 Palestinians. But the BDS movement boycotted and tried to get a giant boycott divestment campaign going against SodaStream. So they moved the facilities out of that area. What did it cause? So the people that claimed to care for Palestinians caused something like 500 Palestinians to lose their jobs. Oh, okay, great. SodaStream did well. They wound up, I think, selling to Pepsi. They did great. And those idiots made those other idiots lose their jobs.
I think one of the things we missed yesterday was there were a few Republican senators that went against Bobby Kennedy Jr., but that's not the bigger point. There was a senator, I'm blanking on his name, that, and you could probably find this later, Golan, where he compared when we say we're governed by God to Iran and it being no different than Sharia law. And, you know, this is
You're going to love who it is, by the way. I listened to this.
What's his name?
It's Tim Kaine.
Oh, it was Tim Kaine. I'm sorry.
And the funniest
right.
thing about that is he's known as the most forgettable person. Even SNL did a sketch bringing him on, making fun of the fact that he's the most forgettable person, and then you forgot about him. That was almost perfect sketch comedy, what you did there. Keep going.
Right. No. So it was Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate. That was the funny part. We are a Judeo-Christian society that many of our laws are from the Bible. And I don't have any issues with that. But we don't pick the murderous parts of that Golan. And just so many, it was such a distorted, sick analogy in any way to use. And again, but this is how the left thinks. They believe it's their job to govern us like parents. And in their case, it's abusive and disturbed parenting.
Also, it's just communist thinking, on top of everything else. The communist way of thinking is that if rights come from the government and not from God or not by creator, and I am not a religious guy, so this is not me, preaching from the mound here. I just think there's a reason why we structure it this way. If they come from the government, then the government can choose to redefine or limit or revoke those rights and do it at will. And if something comes from creator or is whatever you want to, from the universe or whatever words you want to use to define it, then it's something that you can't just take away from me because you feel like it. You have to show that there is a reason behind it that is good for society, and then you have to prove it to enough people to vote for it. And that is a different mentality. Communist thinking is the government is God. Democracies don't work that way. And we shouldn't pretend that we do. And comments like this, especially pretending to not understand the difference between Islamism or Sharia law and the Christian backbone that the entire country is literally built upon. It's the foundational principle of the Declaration of Independence. If we pretend to, look, I am a Jew and I grew up in America. And my father used to say to me, just remember, this is a Christian country, act accordingly. I never took that as an offensive thing, and I never took that as something I had to be worried about, because Christianity equals moralism. That's why Judeo-Christian values are a term. If I grew up in Islam or Sharia law, I would have been worried every day. And that is the difference. And Tim Kaine pretending to not know the difference means he's either a fool or a liar, and there's no third option.
Mend, it's amazing that they never talk about the dangers of Islam until they compare it and try to contrast it with the dangers of Christianity. I found it to be absolutely disgusting. The one time you invoke, and I love how they did Iran. Like, they're the okay target right now. It's like, let's go after Iran, not the rest of the nut jobs in that region. But Iran's safe.
I'm trying to imagine if I wrote a screenplay right now and the bad guys were the Sharia law people, I would be thrown out of town. Iran, for the moment, they get to have that be a bad guy that's okay.
Yeah. There is a thing where every time they bring up anti-Semitism, they bring up Islamophobia, they just cannot help themselves. As far as the administration that's in power right now, and what I think he should be doing, besides everything we talked about, labeling UNRWA as a terrorist organization, kicking the UN out of the country. But when the Taliban had that military parade where they showed off the billions of dollars in military hardware that we left them, we should have carpet bombed that parade. We should have bombed that damn parade. You do not get away with that. We have the big stick. Don't even pretend. These are tiny little hyenas coming up to the lion and trying to nip at the lion. And once in a while, the lion just takes them out. And we're in that phase. We're in that era right now, where for the last few administrations, Biden and Obama and going all the way back to Clinton, I mean, they were acting weak. They were acting like we were on somehow the same footing as these terrorist organizations or these little banana republic cockroach countries out there that are run by nothing more than little warlords. So flex that muscle. I like that we're doing it in Venezuela. We're about to do something there, but they should be doing it in the Middle East. In the Middle East, there's a concept where they understand they understand strength, which is why Israel's always trying to project this over emboldened strength that they have, because that's what scares their foes. When you see Hamas doing these, handover of the hostages, and they all get dressed up with their military gear and they come out and they're all bombastic in front of their people, same thing. They're trying to project strength. And after killing the Hamas propaganda guy, they found all the documentation of what their guidelines were. And they were, one of the things was never admit defeat, ever. Like always project some strength, even when you get your asses kicked, even when everybody's dead. If there's one guy left, you make him get up and hold up a victory sign and say, "We won." Always, that's what they do. So hitting them hard.
It's just that kind of projection. And the thing that we tiptoe around is not just that, but it's something that Judah kind of mentioned, and we moved past it really quickly. I don't want to move past it. Judah, you said, yeah, when the Islamists decide they're going to rule things, they look at the murdery parts. And when the Christians are ruling things, they look at the moral parts. And this is the thing that we have to not move past. People need to hear this, and they need to hear it over and over again. It's the thing we tiptoe around, but Christianity's trajectory, and we're talking post-Reformation, post-Enlightenment, post-secularization, all of that, because the Bible's got some violent passages and some terrible stuff in it. The idea is we've reinterpreted that, we've evolved, so now it becomes a human rights framework, a moral philosophy framework, right? And when you think about how Christians treat other people, they lean on the moral parts of it. Love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek, treat others like you want to be treated, all of that. It's like the backbone of Western civilization. When you look at Islamism, they say, okay, how are we going to re-weaponize the most violent parts of our book? If you're looking at the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS and the Ayatollah in Iran and all the rest, you're talking about their trajectory is to cling harder to the violent injunctions, to kill all the unbelievers, to do jihad. And by the way, Zoran Mamdani, all good with jihad, all good with from the river to the sea, all the stuff that is straight up not Islam, but Islamism, the worst version, right? Subjugation of non-Muslims and on and on and on. That cannot be ignored. And again, Tim Kaine bringing that up while hoping that no one notices that he's pulling a verbal sleight of hand is either disingenuous or he is a moron. And it could be both, but it can't be any third option.
Listen, I think you're both 100% correct. But I want to move on, though, a little bit, because yesterday ICE arrested, I think, 450 people at a Hyundai plant in Georgia, the largest raid ever.
It looks like a lot of them are South Koreans.
Hyundai is South Korean. It was illegal immigrants that were working at the factory.
Hundreds of South Korean nationals among the 475 detained.
There were, I think it was like 300 of them were South Korean citizens.
This actually proves the point, is that it doesn't matter where these people came from illegally. If they're here illegally and they shouldn't be here, they can't be here. And if they got nabbed in a raid that is going on in states that is not cooperating with ICE and they're not handing over their criminals to ICE, you're going to see a lot of this stuff where people that are not violent criminals, they're working at a auto plant, get picked up and get kicked out of the country. And it is entirely the fault of the Democrats for two reasons. One is that they didn't shut down the border. When they opened the border, they let 10 to 20 million people in, 10,000 a day for 4 years straight. And the second thing is not cooperating with ICE to get the criminals out. And when you don't do that, you're going to have consequences like this. Am I for kicking out people that are here that did not commit any crime aside for crossing the border? Not necessarily. I wish they would go after the actual criminals first. But am I for it when they do these giant raids and they're nabbing them along with criminals because these states don't comply and don't cooperate? Absolutely. This is what you get.
You're right. If you're here illegally, you're here illegally.
I think it's a really, really good point, because people who are like, oh, you're being racist against Latinos or Hispanic people, or people are, they're saying, oh, people you're saying from S-hole countries, like, that whole controversy. It's like, no, just illegals in general. Thank you for playing. And this is proof positive that we're not selectively deciding which thing it's going to come from. It's, if you're here illegally, there's a consequence, period.
And also, people that are here illegally are inflating the census. They are inflating the census in certain areas And that is a problem that needs to be addressed regardless of whether or not the people that are here illegally are committing crimes. They need to be removed from the country as well as the people that are committing violent crimes. So overall, this is healthy for the country to get the people that are not here legally out. Again, they are going after, there's special teams that are going after the high value criminals, but they also have to do this thing called dragnet, where you just cast a wide net, and whoever you catch, you catch. And if it happens to be some guy that's building autos and he hasn't done anything else wrong, sorry, buddy, you should have come the legal way. Really unfortunate. You should have done it the right way. I get it. The previous administration made it really easy and incentivized a lot of people to come. But this is a new administration, and this administration upholds the law, and this is upholding the law. And we have laws in this country. And if you want to be here, you should probably abide by them.
You know, it's a great point. And Golan, I think the reason we keep bringing stuff up is because so many of these things are done by executive action or executive orders. They're not being passed through Congress. So obviously everybody's fear always is that we have 3.5 years to do this. And when you look at current polling, J.D. Vance is just dominating Newsom in every swing state. It's what we thought. It's arguments that I've had with people. He doesn't translate. But again, this is one of those things. It's like, it's very scary because Trump leaves and a Democrat wins, everything gets reversed.
Right.
And we have to keep bringing these things up over and over again. And we can't have this sympathy. It's the Rogan sympathy, right? It's like, oh, you're taking the poor gardeners. You're here illegally. You're here illegally. You know, and there's a great clip of Melania Trump talking about how she immigrated here, and she would have to go back to Slovakia every few months and renew the visa. Then she got the green card, and then she finally became a citizen. She did it correctly. And, you know, just for the record, just so people understand this, I believe it's 25% of the top 1% are foreigners in our country legally, which is an astronomical number, which also shows you things being done the right way go great. They work out. You get to be first lady.
I think that in general, forget whether you get to be the first lady or you get to be a billionaire, you get to found some massive company. There are rules. I mean, I can say this 50 different ways, but there are rules. And if you don't follow those rules, I'll give you an example. I'm a good example of this, actually, because I have lived in so many different places and my family and I have traveled from place to place. We were living in Bulgaria, and while we were living there, going through the bureaucratic process of renewing visas, I was on a film studio a lot there, but still, we still had to go through the process. And the bureaucracy is insane. It's very dirty, very corrupt country. So we're paying a lot of money in cash to the people at the counter, but they're like, no, that fee has to be paid in cash. You have to put it in a brown paper sack. You know, like it was all stuff like that. And there was a moment where we missed our deadline. We were out of the country and we came back into the country, and Emily, my wife, and I were both talking to each other, and we were like, what happens if they stop us at the border? And she said, we know we're doing this illegally. We know that we don't have the paperwork. If they stop us at the border, then we deserve it. Then we go deal with it, because we're aware there are rules and we're aware there are consequences. Am I hoping they don't stop me at the border? Of course. But if they do, it's like, I asked for this and I got what I asked for. How am I allowed to complain about it later? I'm not. And I don't think any of these people should be either. They knew what they were doing when they decided not to go through the proper process. And now there are consequences. And if they get caught, okay, it didn't work out for you. You rolled the dice and you didn't need to.
But listen, well said. And you're talking to somebody, the dude who, listen, he did everything by the books, by the process to go to Canada, everything he needed to do. You have to comply with the system. And that is not an easy country, as we've brought up many times. I want to go to this, though, because Pam Bondi came out today, and they're acknowledging, they're showing the anti-Christian things that the Biden administration did to the Christian community with their prayer services, and so the list goes on. The question is, at what point are you exposing, and what point are you going to actually charge? We're quite a few months in, and I think people are going to start to get a little tired. It's great that you bring things to our attention that we already knew. This isn't like, hey, you're revealing something that nobody knew. And when are the 51 intel agents going to get charged? When is Bolton, as we discussed yesterday, going to get charged? When are people that use the auto pen going to get charged? These are things American people that voted Trump in want to know, want to see. They want to see people getting charged, because this is the only way you're going to prevent the Democrats from weaponizing once again what they did for the last 4 years and the previous 8 years before Trump, and will never stop doing. When are people going to prison?
And that's the big thing, is that in the first Trump administration, 2016, he made a lot of statements, lock her up and all this other stuff. And then none of that came to fruition. And rightly or wrongly, I mean, he chose not to go after Hillary because he thought it would be really bad for the country. But then they came after him, not just with impeachment. This is really important to note. Impeachment was not enough for the Democrats. They wanted to go after him criminally, and they changed the statute of limitations to be able to do that. And they invented crimes that didn't exist to be able to charge him with it. So when Pam Bondi comes out with these big statements and the 51 spies who lied and all of that, if the people don't see actual prosecutions, if they don't see them coming after them, there's going to be mass upheaval. There's going to be mass repercussions for the Republicans, especially when it comes time to voting. And I'm not talking about people switching teams and voting for the lunatics on the left. I think that they will just stay home and say it's pointless. It's useless. So it is critical that they take action against these people. Kash Patel said he found burn bags in the FBI of evidence that should have been exculpatory evidence for the people that were either charged in January 6th or the Christians that were being prosecuted for praying in their heads next to an abortion clinic or whatever. All of that stuff. Labeling Moms of Liberty, the parental rights organization that just advocated for keeping schools sane, keeping schools to math and science and not to gender and race ideology, right? That's what this group wanted. They got labeled as a hate group.
Golan, the bigger point is to add to what men said was arresting women in front of an abortion clinic that were just there choosing to have signs that say pro-life on them. That prosecuting people during COVID for having little synagogues like Danny Grand in their homes. This is what they did. They actively went after other groups.
If you want to know what they did and where they got it, just look at what happened in the UK, because that's where we were going. In the UK, if a Pakistani rape gang rapes your daughter and you say anything about it, they called you a Islamophobe and a fascist, and you need to just shut up. You need to just take it. And it's happened, I think it's over 200,000 cases of these rape gangs that were covered up from the bottom, which means from the local law enforcement to the local psychologist who interviewed the girl at the hospital, to the doctors, and then it goes all the way up through local government, all the way up to the top of the government. And the top was Keir Starmer. He wasn't the prime minister at the time, but he was the leader of Labour, and Labour pandered to these Pakistani rape gangs because they wanted the Pakistani votes. And there it is. That is the pivot point of where it becomes a runaway chain reaction that you can't stop. When you have immigration to the point where they don't assimilate, they start pushing advocacy of their way of life, which in the UK meant raping little white girls, which is all they wanted to do, these guys. And a lot of them did it. So you let in so many, they don't assimilate, they start raping your people, and then you can't say anything about it because there's so many of them that you need that vote. And there it is. It's off the rails. It's gone. You can't stop it. So that's what happened in the UK.
I want to get back to Judah's the original question, because I think you're raising a really important point. But I want to go back to that question of consequences, right? We keep hearing about these things that they're discovering. As you said, men, they found the burn bags, and they're exposing this and they're exposing that. We've exposed it all. Right? We exposed the auto pen fraud. We exposed the Russia hoax. We exposed the FBI censorship of big tech. We exposed the IRS slow walking this and going after these people and everything else. We've exposed it all. We haven't seen any consequences actually applied to any of that exposure. And exposing corruption is great. And that idea of sunshine disinfects, or whatever the saying is. But sunshine without consequences just gives everybody a tan. And right now, it's like the exposing has become its own little pocket industry, right? Pam Bondi will do a press conference and we all cheer her on for exposing something. Ted Cruz gives a fiery speech and we like it. It's good. He's exposed something. And we see it over and over again. They all get these cool clips for Twitter. The left doesn't care if they're exposed. The left doesn't care if they've been caught. We've talked about this before. If you were to take the guy who leaked the documents from the Supreme Court, and they caught them, even if it was a federal offense, by the way, after serving a small sentence, that guy would be lionized and he would get his own show on MSNBC and he would be a hero to the left. And that's the way it would stay. And so if we don't have something, and by the way, we've seen this before, right? The reality winner leaked classified information, gets on magazine covers, gets a movie made about her. Chelsea Manning dumps state secrets, gets a fellowship at Harvard, right? Like, this is what they do. They don't care about being exposed. They don't care about being discovered if there are no consequences. And we keep hearing about things and waiting to see what's going to be the consequence, and they don't come. And I am as frustrated as all of you, and we read this stuff on Truth Social on a regular basis, people saying, maybe someday someone will actually suffer a consequence for this stuff, and it hasn't happened yet. So it's gone from sarcasm to genuine distress. I'm in the same boat, and it's driving me nuts.
I also think it's important to note that when Trump went through the original Mueller report, the Dems didn't have Congress. And look at what they did when they didn't have power. We're actually in power and nothing is getting done. People want to see. I don't want to see people questioned. I don't want to question the people without telling us. And this goes to Men's point, both of your points. We want to see action, not announcements.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
we
that's a perfect. Say it again.
We want to see actions and not announcements. And it meant that at a certain point, it's like, okay, great. You're calling all these people up. You're subpoenaing people. I don't care at this point. I want to see what happens to them.
Yeah, there was a justice, a high justice, a chief justice in the UK, 1924. And he made this statement that said, justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. So his name was Lord Hewart. And that basically gets to the bottom of it. It's
very good.
Right? It's not just that it needs to be done. The people, us, the citizens need to be seeing, we need to see it in order for it to be done. Don't just make these, and that's the problem with like a lot of these big proclamations that Pam Bondi made and a lot of well-intentioned administration staff have come out and made statements like that. Fauci lied. We know Fauci lied. Fauci lied to Congress. Why is he not being brought up on charges right now for the gain of function? If not anything else, and forget about the murder of all the Americans that he oversaw, the lying about not doing gain of function when he did gain of function and he created that virus, we paid for that virus and it killed more Americans than any other country. So we did the worst when it came to COVID. A lot of that has to do with the obesity rates in America, but a lot of it also has to do with the government never telling people, go get sunlight, go for a run,
but the
get
question
healthy.
is, how is any of that a deterrent if there are no consequences? I keep saying every time I watch these Palestinian riots happening, they just had a big bike race in Spain, a very famous bike race, and they couldn't finish the leg of the bike race because all these pro-terror idiots decided to come out with flags and actually assault bikers and block the road and all of that, and said that for safety, we're just going to cancel the end of the race. There's no winner for this leg. And then instead of saying we're going to deal with these Palestinian protesters, they actually went to the Israeli team and said, would you guys mind dropping out? It might be safer for everybody. And this is like, you just easily are kowtowing to the terrorists. And I always ask the same question. What would have happened if every one of those people with a flag, and I would never advocate for violence, obviously, but what if they all got tased to the point that they shit themselves and then were debilitated for the rest of their lives, or God forbid, got shot, or God forbid, died? Do you think if that happened over and over again, we'd still see a bunch of these riots happening? I don't know. That's how deterrents work. Again, I would never advocate for such a thing. I'm just saying,
well, that's why
what would be the result?
That's why what Trump did with Los Angeles immediately at the beginning of the summer was sending in the National Guard and then ICE, National Guard, and the Marines. It was a deterrent, and we didn't see a summer of riots. I believe had he not done that, we might have. I don't think that's a crazy thing to think about. But I want to get back to this, though, because when you look at it, the second Biden took over, let's see what happened immediately. Tom Barrack got indicted. $250 million of bail. Warp speed. Absolute warp speed of indictments coming down, investigations going on. We had obviously, listen, I'm not a huge fan of Steve Bannon by any means, and he went to prison for contempt, but nobody goes of Congress. Nobody goes. And so did Peter Navarro. What is he, 80 years old? They put him in prison. People want to see this. You have to fight back with the same fight they gave you, if not even harder. There have to be consequences to these actions. There have to be consequences to people like Fannie Willis, Letitia James in New York. There have to be to Alvin Bragg. There have to be consequences. Look at the hell they put us through with nothing, Golan, with literally almost zero evidence, and we have nothing but evidence in front of us. That's the frightening part. What more evidence do we need than seeing the video of them lying? What more evidence do we need to see that Facebook didn't release the Hunter Biden laptop and the FBI was in cahoots with them?
Right.
What more evidence do we need than James Comey being corrupt? What more do we need? This is what I think people get frustrated, especially like me, is when we actually see the evidence. They're not being covert about
But this goes back to what we were talking about yesterday. We are at a point right now where the mentality of everybody in the world, especially in America, is so divided that they cannot see the forest for the trees. They cannot see the evidence for the reality. Remember yesterday I was bringing up, how many times do you need to see that the piece of propaganda that you're looking at actually is fake to realize you're just constantly being lied to? By the 20th one that's been debunked, you either are now choosing to believe lies, or you are ignorant to the fact that these are lies. But if it's always in your face, you are deliberately putting up a wall, a Chinese wall, where you have to say, I just am not going to see evidence against it. Same thing here. Over and over again, we see evidence, and the evidence is now, in some cases, crystal clear. It's no longer disputed. It's no longer something that hasn't been prosecuted yet. And yet there are still no consequences. And I understand why everyone's frustrated. It's about time that we start planting deterrence in the dirt so they can grow into trees.
Again, justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. So yes, you're absolutely right. Judah brought up some really good points about how fast the Biden justice regime was moving. How many J6 defendants they locked up and threw away the keys, put them in solitary confinement.
Immediately.
Treated them like they were real foreign-born terrorists when these guys were just walking through the halls peacefully between the red ropes. Yeah, sure, there were some lunatics outside waving flags and screaming, "Storm the Capitol." Half of them were FBI agents. Like the Gretchen Whitmer case, where she was supposedly kidnapped by 12 guys. 10 out of the 12, or 8 out of the 12, were FBI agents. The other 4 guys were morons who couldn't tie their own shoelaces. They didn't even know what they were doing. So that whole case fell apart. And you're right. They are not moving fast enough. I wish they would move faster, and I hope they are taking it seriously. The people demand justice, and we need it to be seen. They got to do this, and they got to do it quick. In the first administration, when they talked about all this stuff with who they were going to go after, and then it all fizzled, I was let down. I was like, look, if you have all this evidence against these people committing so many crimes, and then forget about the Hillary and her servers, I'm talking about everybody else, that they could have done, they didn't. And then when the tables were turned, the other side, the Democrats, made up stuff. They literally fabricated stuff. We were talking to Gene Hamilton, and he was like, if I don't wind up in the gulag. And what was he afraid of? Because he's fighting for civil liberties. He's doing what the ACLU is not doing. He's not, a partisan shill. He's literally fighting for Americans for free, and he's fearful that he might wind up in jail under a Democrat-run administration, because that is what they do. The only thing this administration can do is actually prosecute these people and do it fast, because the left is going to deny that there's anything wrong until a jury of their peers actually lock these people up. And once these people are in jail, there's nothing the left can do. Justice is served. So go for it. Do it at light speed. Get these people done. Our local prosecutor is now working in...
Not light speed, warp speed.
Warp speed. Our local prosecutor here in Huntington Beach got recruited to Washington. Michael, go after them. Get them.
Yeah, go on. I mean, this is a big point. I don't think you could talk about this point enough, because when average Americans are starting to get frustrated by this, and it's tiring and it's tedious, and we just want to see action.
Do you know who's not getting frustrated by it?
The criminals.
Criminals. They are loving it. Again, I hope they move quick. Let's move on.
Okay, so yesterday, Golan, Macron said that there were about 25, I think 26 countries that were willing to go into the Ukraine. And people always say it's Israel that wants to get us into wars. This is obviously something that France wants. And so Putin comes out today and says any foreign troops deployed to the Ukraine, particularly while its invasion was still ongoing, would be considered legitimate targets, which I think is obvious. Putin's came hours
Right.
after his comments came after European leaders repledged their commitment to a potential peacekeeping force, a prospect that Moscow has repeatedly described is not a great move. But here again is the problem. When you see images of Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and Putin, this is an issue. I don't know what we do about this issue. This is really the quagmire we're in because obviously Trump and the Republican Party didn't run on war, didn't run on any of these things. But this is a really existential threat. We're not just talking about militarily, we're talking about financially. Many levels that these three getting together could cause chaos to the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Looking at those pictures is surreal. It feels like someone just had a field day using AI because it's like one of those jokes of which people would you have at your dinner if you wanted to have all the genocidal leaders in one room, and you're just like, oh, I don't know, Putin, Kim Jong Un. Like it just feels fake, but it's real, which is super concerning. It reminds me, this is a dated reference, but I cannot shake it. It's the only thing I've been thinking about since I looked at those photos. It reminds me of the opening scene from the original Naked Gun with Leslie Nielsen, where he walks into the room and it's every one of the Islamist leaders in a room together, all figuring out how they're going to take over the United States. It just looks like that. And this is something that we, again, not to keep beating a dead horse, but if you are an America only or whatever you call it at this point, you are ignoring the not the elephant in the room, but the elephant that's sitting on your head. And sooner than later, it's going to take a dump and you won't be able to ignore it anymore.
Well said. And by the way, I think it's important to note that Judge Janine actually Pirro charged two teens with murder today in the congressional intern in June. So you're seeing people like Judge Janine who are extremely hard on crime. I wouldn't mind if she was actually the attorney general. I think we would probably see prosecutions far quicker. But again, congrats to Judge Janine for doing this. I think obviously it took time to gather up the evidence, but it hasn't been that long, and they're being charged today. So good for her. I think they're actively seeking somebody else to charge. But this is what we're talking about, and they got to get in shape. And I just wanted to bring that up before I forgot. But your thoughts on what we just brought up about Putin and the rest of this conundrum?
You know, the big show of force that China just put on is both telling and it also exposes them. So the telling part is China displayed some new weapons that they've got that are concerning. China clearly has intent to take Taiwan, but also to be able to do whatever they want without the risk of American interference on a global scale. So they're doing the Belt and Road Initiative where they go to these poor countries. They say, look, we're going to take all of we're going to mine all the lithium and all the precious earth metals from your land. And in exchange, we're going to build a road across your thing or a stadium or a bridge. And, you're going to owe us X amount of billions of dollars because we're going to build a railroad or a train or road or whatever it is. And these countries get excited by the prospect of a new stadium. It was funny, Costa Rica, which is supposed to be a bastion of liberal democracy. They don't have an army. They do have an army. They have a police force that's as big as an army. They just don't call it an army. But they're protected by the U.S. They were aligned with Taiwan, which is the right side to be. The Taiwanese are independent and they seek self-determination, and China keeps on threatening to take that land and turn it into part of China. Costa Rica aligned themselves with Taiwan. China comes along and says, we're going to build a stadium for you if you switch sides. And like little whores, they switch sides in an instant. They got this crappy stadium built with, this is the other part of it. Costa Rica now owes them money for the stadium. The people that built the stadium are all Chinese imports. So China has a labor issue, so they want to get their people employed. So they go to these countries, they say, we're going to give you a stadium. They then get allegiance from that country. They build the stadium. The country owes them the money for the stadium. And the people who built it were Chinese nationals who all got paid by the Costa Rican government to build the stadium. So it's working out great for China. And then Costa Rica is up to their eyeballs in debt to China. That's not great. So, and they're doing this across Africa. They're hoovering up. They are loading up boatloads of precious earth metals. They bring it back to China to process. So that's why China controls something like 90% of the rare earth metals on the planet. They've done this again and again and again. So this show of force that they did where they gathered in China to commemorate beating the Japanese. Who'd they have on hand? They had North Korean Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, one of the Kim Jongs, and they had the Russian president, and they had a couple of other presidents from countries that you've never heard of because nobody takes them seriously, a couple of African nations.
Was India represented there as well?
India
Did I see that?
was there. Interestingly,
India was too. That's why he called out India too. Yeah.
India's messing up.
Yeah,
India,
I agree. That's why I wanted to bring this up.
India is messing up in a big way. So here's the deal, is that historically, Pakistan was aligned with China and Russia, and India was aligned with the US. And in the most recent skirmish between India and Pakistan, Trump got them to cool down. The Pakistanis came out and said, thank you, Trump, for de-escalating. The Indians came out and said Trump had nothing to do with it, which I don't even get the calculus there. One, if it's true, it's idiotic to say because the guy obviously was involved, whether he caused them all to de-escalate, which the Pakistanis say and the Americans say, or as the Indians say, it just happened. I mean, obviously it didn't happen. Trump threatened them both that we're going to cease doing all business with all of them. Basically we will just cut them off if they don't figure this out and end this war. And they ended it. And then when it came time to buying fuel from Russia, which supports the Russian war effort in Ukraine, the Indians balked. Do they have a claim that we are unfairly targeting them? Yes, they do. They do. China buys more oil from Russia than India does. And we are in the middle of trade negotiations with China. And Trump did not want to ruffle their feathers more by imposing more sanctions on them. He looked at India as a weaker of the two, and he came down harder on India. That happens. The world is unfair. But do you know who else buys a lot of oil from Russia? The Europeans. The people whose continent this war is on have given Russia more money throughout this war than they've given to Ukraine. So they are actively funding the war. And there, India has a better claim. And Trump is actually pushing them harder. I think he should push them a lot harder. There are real consequences, especially with them actively sabotaging the peace efforts between Israel and Gaza. Had the Europeans just shut up, there was a Hamas a proposal that was given to Hamas, and they would have accepted it. It was a final proposal to end the war, release all the hostages, and surrender. And they were pretty close. All indications state that they were pretty close to accepting it until France came out and said, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. And then the UK, and then everybody else. So they sabotaged that deal. And I think for that alone, they should be punished really hard.
Which is a proof of point of what I've always said, was that the only relevance the European Union has is propping up the enemy in the Middle East. Because if there is peace and the Abraham Accords are successful, it renders them even more useless and impotent than they already are. But Golan, I just want to quickly, before I get to the last story, to say what Mend is talking about. I know some people might get a little upset with me for saying this. I'm not opposed if Europe wants to invade or wants to attack Russia. I have zero problems at this point if we give as many arms as possible, as long as it's paid for by somebody else to the Ukraine. Because I really believe that the Russian army at this point, the Russian army and the Russian technology has been so overblown. Over the equipment they have are relics. And I just want, when you look at their airplanes, when you look at how many Russian airplane crashes there have been through the years, we love to talk about Russia like they're this technological savant. And men could attest to this. Every car service, when we were growing up in Brooklyn, every car service driver would always say to us, right, man, when you'd get in the car, you'd say,
hello, I am former nuclear scientist. Where do you want
they
me
were
to
all
take
former
you?
nuclear scientists or former doctors, and I'm not knocking them. They were doing yeoman's work. But Golan, I really think we have to look at, and I know men's going to disagree with this, is I'm not saying invade us. I don't want us invading. We're never a troop on the ground from us in Russia, not one. But I have no problem arming up Ukraine at this point.
Look, the thing about Russia is that they've got a bunch of nukes. Most of those nukes are from the 60s, but still, they got a bunch of nukes. They got a bunch of people. It's a lot of space. They got a lot of people, and they can take those people and basically say, hey, you're going to go to the army or you're going to go to the gulag or whatever. And they throw those people into the meat grinder. So they've got constant people that they can just throw at this problem. They don't care if they get mowed down. And at least somewhat, they've got enough money because, as I don't remember who said it, but someone said at one point, it's basically a failed a failed company with a gas station attached to it, something like that. And their whole business model is oil, gas, and a couple of minerals, right? It's basically if Exxon merged with the current day Radio Shack.
It's a great advertisement for Russia.
Yeah, but that's the reality of it. So it's one of those things where you can look at it, and yeah, a lot of that place. And I have a lot of friends in Russia. My father used to have an office in Russia. I've seen it, right? This is a place that is still very much rooted in the past. They have not evolved. A lot of that place is still living in a Stone Age kind of environment, but they've got a lot of money to throw at war. And as long as you don't care about anything else, as long as you don't care about the reunification of the USSR or whatever you're trying to do on the world stage or being one of the world powers, as long as you don't care about that, everything else can be wrapped up in duct tape, because as long as you have your finger over that button and enough people buying gas from you, it doesn't matter. And so to Men's point, if we are going to do something about it, and Europe keeps pretending they're doing, and yet we're buying oil, we're coming in door A saying we're going to kill you,
that's the
and coming in door
hypocrisy.
B and paying for it, we're paying for their war.
Yeah, that's the hypocrisy. So I'll agree with Men. I know he's going to disagree with me. It's like if you're these countries and you actually want to stop Russia, stop buying fuel from them, and then have a conversation. So
here's the deal with troops on the ground. You're saying troops, not American troops, but you're saying if you want to have the Europeans invade Russia or fight Russia, that's a great idea. You're all for it. I'm absolutely against that. They are NATO members, and that will absolutely pull us in.
No. I was basically saying I am not really for troops on the ground, even from the Europeans.
It sounded like you guys were agreeing, actually.
Let me clarify that. I am not for the Europeans going because, yes, that will be a provocation of us because we're members of NATO. I am for arming them up as much as humanly possible. And I know we keep on talking about that they have tons of troops. But if they did, they wouldn't need troops from North Korea. They wouldn't need troops from China.
That's actually misleading. So what he's doing that on a political calculus. He did a draft, and it caused major chaos, especially in St. Petersburg, but also Moscow. Big blowback from the elites, the rich that live in Moscow. They don't want their kids going and dying in Ukraine. So it is politically good for him to get these poor North Koreans to come and die in the meat grinder than it is for him to send the sons and daughters of the elite from Moscow to the front lines. So that's what he's doing now. But if they had to, they would. And don't get me wrong. Everybody is saying, the big geniuses out there are saying Russia is bluffing with the nukes. They're bluffing. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. What if they're not? Are you willing to take that risk? That is such a stupid comment to say that the country with the nuclear weapons, if they're backed into a corner, you don't think they'll use it. And what if you're wrong? You're talking about hundreds of millions of people dying on the European continent and the place becoming toxic for 10,000 years. That's the risk you're willing to take because you don't think, or you think they're bluffing. What if they're not? So I think that is absolutely one of the dumbest takes out there. I was Putin. If I was in his shoes, I absolutely would use a small one, just as a in your face to the Europeans and the Americans saying, what now? I just took out Kiev, right? Took it out. What are you going to do about it? You're going to fire a nuke at us? You want to get into a nuclear war with Russia? Nobody wants that.
Especially because they have 6,000 warheads that you can't.
I mean, he could easily
also at the same time. This is also Golan being constantly used against us. This threat, and we have to end this one way or the other. We cannot continue like this. We cannot continue with China doing what Mend is talking about, what China's doing everywhere across the world. We can't do it. We can't have.
I think
North
Trump
Korea
gets that. I think that Trump is one of the few people that has said, okay, you're not poking the bear for fun anymore. He projects the strength that Putin recognizes because Putin is a thug and a mafioso. And so he gives him that same kind of personal, kind of that attention. And Putin recognizes, okay, if I use a nuke, even a small one like Men said, even a tactical one, the response won't be finger wagging, not from Trump. It'll be devastating. And we've seen it already happen. Again, Iran is proof of concept. I keep saying that because I think that while we wanted to stop Iran from launching missiles at Israel and we wanted to stop this, helping our allies, the point of doing what he did in Iran was to let everybody know, I said 60 days, 61, this is what happens. So what happens if you use a small nuke? It's not 61 days. It's going to be far, far worse. Bottom line is Russia is weak. And nukes are the one card they keep playing over and over again. We can say they're bluffing, whatever. At the end of the day, I don't care if we think they're bluffing. I care that we give them, again, to go back to our earlier conversation, a deterrence. And the only way to do that is by showing what deterrence look like. And Trump has done that, which is why I think we don't have suicidal overconfidence. We have a guy with a big stick saying, try it, MFer, try it.
And all my point was, by the way, my biggest point was that Russia, we overestimate and overvalue. I mean, other than, and Mendy is completely right. We really have to cut off the oil. So they have to stop buying. This is something that, remember, before Trump left office, energy independence, we were shipping oil and gas and all these different things. We have to get back to where people are buying it from us, break their economy as much as humanly possible. I don't see any other way out of that. China can only prop them up so much. Xi Jinping is holding on by a thread in China. So these are things that are going on. There are reasons why Xi Jinping is doing that, because the Communist Party of China is not very happy with him.
I want to highlight the difference in strategy between what the previous administration was doing and what Trump administration is doing. So the previous administration said that we're going to arm Ukraine to the last man. We're never going to give up. Everybody's going to die over there, and the Russians eventually will take over. That was their strategy. And they were pushing Russia into a corner where if the Russians were to start losing, they might use a tactical nuke. That was the previous administration's strategy. So it was just death, 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 and more death. And it's going to continue for as long as it takes. Trump is taking a different approach. And what he's doing is he's not militarily provoking the Russians. What he's doing is he's hurting them economically, which is why we're on opposite sides with India right now. He wants to pressure everyone, including the Europeans, stop buying the Russian oil. That's the price that the Russians are going to pay. And he's basically turning to the Russians and going, listen, we're not going to attack you. We don't want to get into a war with you. We want you to end this war. And we're going to make it economically really difficult for you if you don't end the war. And we'll make it really, we can incentivize you if you do end the war. And then they didn't end the war. They had the Alaska summit. It didn't lead to anything. So now he's resorting to the pressure tactic, which makes so much sense. It doesn't lead us to World War III. The previous administration was marching us towards World War III. This guy is marching us towards an off-ramp by exerting pressure, which is great.
I don't think any of us are disagreeing with you
on
we're
that. We're not. No. And I just wanted to clarify that.
My point, though, is I don't see the off-ramp right now. I understand 100% what Trump is doing, and I think it's brilliant, and I think it's great what he wants.
Well, the off-ramp only works when the pressure is exerted, and unfortunately for us, both the Europeans and India are refusing to stop buying Russian oil.
Right. So
the Europeans have nobody to blame but themselves.
That's right.
And India is just going down a dark path for some reason, and it's unfortunate. India and China and India and Russia are historically foes. India and China have an agreement. There's a territory on their border that is disputed. And the agreement that they have there is that every time we go to war there, you're not allowed to use guns. So they go up there with baseball bats and they bash each other's heads in every, say, 5 or 6 years. And 20 to 50 people die of blunt force trauma or getting thrown off the cliff. And then it simmers down. They're not friends. Now, India is turning towards China and Russia. So they're going to buy weapons from China and Russia. That is going to end really badly for India because all of those weapons have backdoors. And as soon as there's a confrontation with their actual neighbor, their neighbor can just shut off their weapons. So that is not going to end well for the Indians. And it's unfortunate that they're taking that approach.
The last thing I want to discuss, though, is Israel and Hamas. Israel's in Gaza City. I'm not sure if you saw this explosion of the building that they warned everybody to get out of in Gaza City. But did you see the people filming it for propaganda reasons? You have 3 people filming this building. Literally, it shows you how little of a risk and how safe that surrounding area was. And people are filming this. So, of course, this is going to be taken out of context. Israel's leveling Gaza City. It was a infrastructure. But I'm sure you saw this.
I think this is unbelievably important. We hammer this topic a lot, and I think we got to continue hammering it because people still aren't getting it. They're not recognizing that when you have someone in an ambulance holding a baby and giving CPR to the baby while they're trying to drive, and you realize, wait, who's holding the camera? It's the guy in the seat next to him. Why isn't he giving the baby CPR? And the other guy's driving like a bat out of hell. Oh, right, because that baby is a doll, probably. But beyond that, it's because it's specifically for propaganda purposes. We have to stop pretending that Hamas is just fighting Israel with rockets. What you're going to see in Gaza City, what you're already starting to see, and to your point, those people that are filming are already part of this equation. The most dangerous weapon in this area is not a tunnel, it's a tripod. It's the cameras, it's the propaganda. Every strike deliberately is designed to be a photo op. Every civilian death is staged for Instagram, for the useful idiots who are going to see it on TikTok and are going to react emotionally and not logically. You can see this over and over again. And I beg of all of you, especially those of you who hate Israel, especially those of you who are convinced that Israel is committing a genocide or whatever other nonsense you believe, hate me for it, but pay attention to the angles of the camera. No matter what's going on, it's always aimed at the crying child. It's always aimed at the shattered street. It's always aimed at the building falling down, but it's never aimed at the rocket launcher sitting in a schoolyard, sitting in a mosque, sitting in a hospital. It's never aimed at the mortar fire that's coming out of the UN headquarters or UNRWA or whatever it is. The real strategy for them is not to win battles. They are okay losing the battles. It's to win hashtags and for people like you to see those hashtags and see those videos and then cry and then lambaste Israel for it. They deliberately, and you can see it if you're paying attention, they deliberately put their own people in harm's way, not by accident, but by design. Dead Palestinians are their currency. They love it when a dead baby exists that is a Palestinian because they know that it's going to make Western media just show that clip over and over and over again. And I don't know if Western media is cashing a check from Qatar or not, but I know that Hamas is getting that propaganda win and Israel is going to take the blame for it. And many of the people putting those images up know that they are projecting propaganda. And that's just not journalism. That is collaboration with terror. I beg of you to open your eyes and see that you are being manipulated.
Yeah, there was a thing that came out yesterday. I believe it was an investigation by the Free Press, Barry Weiss's Free Press, but she's about to take over. Is she taking over
CBS?
CBS would be great. And a lot of the
Skydance is in talks to buy the Free Press.
A lot of the liberal
et cetera.
minds are being blown because a former New York Times writer who has her head on straight and is honest might be taking over that news outlet, and it will no longer be a Hamas propaganda machine. So the report that came out that basically highlighted that every single Al Jazeera reporter in Gaza must be authorized by Hamas. And they have to run all their stories by Hamas. And if they report anything, or if any reporters in Gaza states anything that is counter to the Hamas narrative, the Al Jazeera reporters are the ones that are exposing them to Hamas. And then Hamas goes and either kills them or breaks all their bones and all that. So yes, there is a massive propaganda machine, and the media, this is the disturbing part, is that Western media goes along with it. They have been complicit in that scam that is going on. And as far as blowing up that building in Gaza City, blow them all up. All of these buildings, every single one of those buildings. Look, Israel announced that they're going to go into Gaza City. And for the last 700 days, since this war started, it's 700 days old now. For the last 700 days and prior, Hamas has been preparing for the Israeli invasion. They are booby-trapping every single building. They are laying traps, mines in the roads, IEDs all over the place. Those things blow up on innocent civilians all the time. I've seen some videos, some little girl running with her water jugs, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, she goes kapow, and there's no incoming fire. It was from the ground out. You could see the charge, the way the explosion happens, that it was from underneath that it came, and it wasn't a missile that shot down. So, a lot of innocent people are being killed. These people have insane amounts of weapons, and they've booby-trapped the entire place. You move the population, you lay siege, and you bomb. You know who did this really well? Not that I'm an advocate of his, but Assad, who was the president of Syria, his father, Hafez al-Assad, had a problem because there were people out of these villages. I think it was Hama was the name of the town, but I'm not sure. They were, Islamists trying to overthrow his government. And he surrounded the town with tanks and artillery and laid siege, and then, started to just lob bombs until there was nothing left but rubble. And the difference between what he's doing and what Israel's doing is he didn't let the civilians flee. He didn't let anyone flee. He killed them all. And there was not one protest in the West for that. An entire city was obliterated to the point that you could walk on the rubble from one side to the other without ever encountering an obstacle too big that would prevent you from traveling. So he bombed the crap out of that place until there was nothing left but little rocks. And Israel needs to do that to Gaza City after the civilians flee. And they're doing that sieve or the checkpoint thing where they're going to make sure that none of the bad guys get out. And then don't even send troops in. You just bomb it from the air.
I'm going to give one of my, well said, and we got to close up shop in a minute, but I want to just, you brought up something because they released more propaganda videos, and obviously Hamas did and one of the, sadly, obviously one of the hostages is blind in one eye, and thank God the parents blame Hamas and not Israel. But the propaganda that's going on in the Venice Film Festival, the propaganda that's going on in Toronto Film Festival, and all these actors from Britain and some from America that are talking about the atrocities and going on of the Gazans and don't give a crap about these propaganda videos. I'm going to come up with another point is, here's an idea. Outside of every single film festival, every single red carpet event, they should have massive video screens of the hostages and the propaganda films that Hamas has sent out. Put it on loop. Put flyovers on planes. What about the hostages? Just constantly show these videos that Hamas is releasing. Constantly put out these things so then people could look at it. And maybe you'll get one reporter that has enough guts to go on the ground and say to these people, he'll never be allowed on the red carpet again, but say to one of these actors, do you see the Israeli hostage without the eye? Do you see the Israeli hostages that look like Auschwitz survivors? Do you have anything to say about that? And that would be a hell of a campaign. And again, Golan, this has always been my biggest issue, is that there's not a concerted effort between people to do this stuff together. Everybody is doing stuff on their own instead of it being a mass campaign. And that's why we're losing so much of this. You have a bunch of people independently trying to fight, but imagine if everybody actually got together, how much better off we could be.
I totally agree with you. By the way, this is reminiscent of, I was involved with this effort of what we did at UCLA and at Stanford, and I know other people did it at other places, where we got a big screen when there were the encampments, and we showed on a loop what we were able to show, the things that Israel allowed us to show, but we showed a bunch of the atrocities on a loop. And it disturbed a lot of people, and we did see a lot of people departing those encampments as a result of it, being unaware that that was actually what was happening until they saw it.
Just put it on constant loop. And men, the only thing I'll finish up with saying is this. I agree with you 100% when you brought up, when they lie about the children dying, especially this boy that we found out alive. If there are so many murdered children, you don't need a lie about a dead child. I think that's always a great point. I think it's men that brings it up. It could be Golan, it could be both of your great minds.
I think we both say it because it's obvious. How many times do you need to be given the lie before you realize they don't have any truth?
On that note, I hope everybody has a great and safe weekend. I want to remind everybody you can find this all over at thedailycheatsheet.com. That's thedailycheatsheet.com. If you go there, you will find all our links. That's all you need to do. Share us with a friend. Share us with an enemy. Share us with everybody. Thank you, everybody. I want to wish everybody good morning, afternoon, and night world. Wherever you are, God bless you all.